and just the racist, transphobic, homophobic actions of the Republican Party and the right are not welcome in our city. And we're ready to show that. We're ready to show that, like, this is our city. This is what we're here for. And this is what Milwaukee is about.
Welcome to Fight Back Radio, a production of fightbacknews.org, taking you to the heart of the people's struggle. I'm your host, Richard Berg. And for those of you watching me on YouTube, you'll see I'm dressed incredibly casual, but in my proud CTU, Chicago Teachers Union red. That's because I just came from a board meeting of a charter school where the teachers got up and stood up for themselves and for their students and demanded more in their union contract. And so hats off to the Civitas teachers of the Chicago International Charter Schools who are fighting for a decent contract, and I'm confident they're going to win one. But anyways, that's a little bit of a digression, but I just wanted to give a shout out to them and to anybody who's standing up for their rights and standing up for young people. So thank you for that. We have a great show today where our guest is Hayley McNeill, who is from the Reproductive Justice Action Milwaukee, or the cool people call it RJA-M. And I think you'll enjoy the interview. We're coming on, and this is purposely releasing this now, we're marking 1 year from the time of the Dobbs decision, or the overturning of Roe versus Wade. And Hayley brings an insight into reproductive justice that I think expands the view of what people have traditionally thought of pro-choice, anti-choice, or those kind of things. I think it's, she looks at it in a more holistic way, as does RJA-M, her organization. So I think you're going to enjoy that. Also, I want to encourage people to contact us. We read all our emails from it's Richard at richard.fightbackradio@gmail.com. And I just got a criticism of our last one, and I'll address it a little bit in the conclusion after the interview with Hayley. But I want to encourage people to send their comments to tell us what you think would make our show better, who would be a good guest, things like that, because we appreciate that and we take it seriously. So anyways, with no further ado, here's Hayley McNeill. So I'm here with Hayley McNeill. So welcome to Fight Back Radio, Hayley.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you. So I wanted to ask you about, yesterday marked the anniversary of the Dobbs decision, and you're an activist in Reproductive Justice Action Milwaukee, which is an organization that has fought for reproductive justice, as it sounds. So could you tell our Fight Back Radio listeners a little bit what that decision actually was and what it meant for people in the United States?
Yeah, so the Dobbs decision was the Supreme Court decision that overturned Roe v. Wade. And Roe v. Wade was initially what brought abortion access nationwide to the country back in the 70s. So with the overturning, with the Dobbs decision, that meant that a lot of trigger bans in states across the U.S. went into effect, making it that abortion was no longer accessible and legal in a lot of these states, Wisconsin being one of those, which following the Dobbs decision, a law from 1849 came back into play, making abortion illegal in Wisconsin. So that really, started a fire under a lot of us to say that, hey, we no longer have abortion access. And I think the thing too about the overturning of Roe v. Wade was that it wasn't the end all be all in the first place. Roe basically said, hey, abortion can happen, like abortion access can take place, but they didn't provide the means for that to happen. So throughout the country, there was still a lot of areas that were basically abortion access deserts. It didn't exist. You had to travel miles and miles to be able to access an abortion. And the Dobbs decision just further increased that for a lot of people.
So let me ask you then. So, as a person who believes in, reproductive justice, so what's the strategy now? So, like the right wing for years had this strategy of we want to limit access to abortion, as you pointed out, and we want to pressure the president of the United States and the Congress to appoint very conservative single issue judges. Do you have like a similar strategy? Is that try to regain access and find judges, or how does the movement look right now? To try to bring reproductive justice back.
Yeah. So for us, it is looking at the state. We have started within Reproductive Justice Action Milwaukee. We have focused on Milwaukee first, looking at what we can do within our county and our community specifically. But that very much is then looking at the state as a whole in trying to overturn the ban that's currently in place in Wisconsin. And so few ways we can go with this. Just kind of like broadly, I think what it means for states across the country that do have abortion access, where they do not have bans in place. I think for those states, it's fighting to get abortion access codified, making sure that there doesn't come a place in the future where that access is taken away again. So I think, for certain states like Colorado, that is positioning itself as a sanctuary state, solidify that, make sure that continues to happen and that doesn't get taken away. For states in Wisconsin, states like Wisconsin,
Sure, of course.
we're fighting to overturn that ban to make sure that abortion access comes back. So currently there is actually the Attorney General, Josh Kaul, filed a lawsuit as soon as the Dobbs decision came out, pushing for this 1849 law to, pushing for it to be overturned, asking the question, like, is this law enforceable? Which, the answer is probably no, it's not. It's not enforceable, nor should it be. And so with the hope of that lawsuit is then taking it up to the Supreme Court level to then overturn it.
So what does your organization, what do you do on a day-to-day basis to try to make this happen? Are you trying to influence public opinion? Are you a lobby group that goes and talks to senators about or to potential judges, or what do you do on a day-to-day basis? What does your organization do?
Yeah, so definitely a lot of public opinion, like working with the community. And I would say that, like, we're not here to lobby. We're here to demand and hold elected officials accountable. So to kind of give us some background, Reproductive Justice Action was formed following the Dobbs decision. We're an organization that is, a year old, which feels like a very short amount of time and also feels like a very long amount of time considering the past year. And so what our first action was to get the county to respond, get the county to say to the state, this 1849 ban should not be in place and needs to be overturned. So we worked to get over 1,000 signatures within 3 months from people in the county to present to the Milwaukee County Board of Supervisors, and went and picketed multiple houses of these county board supervisors that say, like, oh, we donate to Planned Parenthood. We're in support of this mission, but they weren't voting that way. They weren't voting to give the public the option to voice their opinion on this matter. So through demanding that and holding these people accountable, we were able to get a resolution passed at the county board level, which said, this 1849 ban is not applicable to today's current state. It is, in fact, dangerous because you're not providing health care. the biggest thing about the Wisconsin ban currently is that it puts physicians in a very like precarious place. They don't know, I'm supposed to save this person's life, but this law, my hands are tied because, well, if that means that if they're pregnant, what could that mean? Like what could happen to me and my license if I'm not able to practice properly?
So there's gray areas. Yeah. So, okay.
Yeah.
But then, okay, so then you went to the county board. You wanted them to have a referendum. Am I right about that?
Yeah. So after we got the resolution passed, we then used that to fight to get a advisory referendum onto the spring ballot. And this advisory referendum was asking the public, should Wisconsin's current abortion ban, should this be overturned? And it was only in Milwaukee County, but we ended up getting 76% of Milwaukee County agreed that this abortion ban should be overturned.
Wow. That's you should be proud. That's very impressive. I mean, Milwaukee County. That's not that long ago. The county exec was Scott Walker, and the guy who became the darling of the far right wing. So I know I used to live in Milwaukee for a number of years, and even though the city has always been somewhat progressive, the county not always, and so that's very impressive. It shows it shows a lot of hard work and education on your part. So congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, we were very proud of that, and I think that's the hard thing as like a grassroots organizer is you're like, oh, this amazing thing happened, but it's still not enough. So just like forcing yourself to like recognize that like this was a big thing. And it showed that, we canvassed more than 2,000 doors in Milwaukee County leading up to the election. And with that election, it was the Supreme Court election in Milwaukee. So it was also important to get people out to the polls for that as well. So our attention was at the referendum, but it was the bigger issue of like, okay, who you're going to vote into the Wisconsin Supreme Court will have an effect on also getting this ban overturned. So, while we need to be smart about that, no matter who gets into the office, we're still going to be making our demands and pushing for our demands to be heard, and ultimately like pushing the policies and not the politicians.
Okay. Let me ask you about, you talked earlier about that you're not simply pro-choice, and that you talk about bodily autonomy, and that the Reproductive Justice Action Milwaukee as this expands beyond just the old, you talked about abortion deserts, but also it affects trans people and, whatever environment for raising children. Can you talk a little bit about your vision of what reproductive justice actually is?
Yeah, definitely. So definitely not taking credit for reproductive justice. I want to make sure that's clear that reproductive justice is a framework that came about in the early 90s by Black women in Chicago. Sister Song is an organization that is very much rooted in what reproductive justice is and, what it means. So we very much are focused around that framework. And reproductive justice is the right to bodily autonomy, the right to have children, the right to not have children, and the right to parent those children in a safe and sustainable community. So we're very much looking at that framework as a guidance for like what we want to see in the world. And just also like from like as me as like a cis white person in this fight, I definitely recognize that even though there isn't abortion access in Wisconsin, I do have the means to travel out of state to get an abortion if I need to. I recognize like my place in this fight. And part of that for me is then saying like, hey, I know that this highly impacts other communities a lot more than me. And it's, I want to take some of that work off your shoulders. Tell me what needs to get done and we'll get it done. So working in Milwaukee, we're very aware of like, this isn't just for white people. Looking at the history of the women's movement, it started very much as like a middle class white organization. And so moving forward, we need to be very inclusive and aware of intersectionality within that. So keeping that in mind, with Reproductive Justice Action Milwaukee, we're very focused on this isn't just about women. This is about anybody that can give birth, including people that are transgender, or people who choose to identify in whatever way they choose. So keeping that in mind, that like reproductive justice, yes, we are focused on abortion access. And the key thing there is access. For us to say like we're pro-choice, that can't exist unless we have access. So prior to Roe v. Wade being overturned, prior to the Dobbs decision in Wisconsin, abortions were only available in Milwaukee County, Dane County, and Sheboygan County. That's 3 counties that are all fairly close to each other when you think about the state of Wisconsin as a whole. So you're seeing how...
So Dane County's where Madison is, and Sheboygan's up Lake Michigan a little bit from Milwaukee.
Yep, just north of Milwaukee. So even prior to that, like there wasn't a lot of access. And even if you were in those counties, there's still social barriers. There's still financial barriers. Is somebody going to be able to take care of my kids while I have this procedure done? Am I going to be able to take off work? Do I have transportation? So there's all these barriers. So you don't really have a choice if you don't have that access. So for us, it's about getting access to therefore then have choice.
Okay, so let me ask you. So we're in Pride Month right now, and in fact, our last episode was our Pride LGBTQ episode here on Fight Back Radio. But what does this mean? What does your vision mean for trans people, for transgender people, and it's something a little different than the historic pro-choice that you mentioned from the 70s. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually listened to that episode, and I was just like, I just want to hear more about what they're doing. That sounds great. But
so a plug for our previous episode where Serena Sojic Bourne was on Fight Back Radio, and thank you for the plug there. We appreciate that, Hayley.
Yeah, absolutely. So for us, like thinking about like I said, it's not just abortion access, it's reproductive health care in general. And for trans people, they deserve reproductive health care too. A lot of people just deserve health care, period.
Right,
it's part of this bigger thing. But looking at reproductive health care, that includes, abortion care. That includes healthcare for trans humans, and that also includes prenatal care, and making sure that during the process of pregnancy and after pregnancy, you also have appropriate care. So that, because childbirth is a very big moment for the body. There's often, I've heard before that the doing a self-managed abortion or medication abortion is actually safer than childbirth because of what the body goes through during childbirth.
So along those lines, though, you were involved, Hayley, in the Save St. Francis Coalition, as was your whole organization, the Reproductive Justice Action Milwaukee. Could you talk? Why were you involved in that? And it relates, I think, a little bit to some of the things we were just talking about healthcare. But what was that? And tell some of our listeners about that.
Yeah, definitely. So in last December 2022, right around Christmas, St. Francis Hospital in the south side of Milwaukee announced that they would be closing their labor and delivery unit. This is a hospital that's owned by Ascension, that owns a lot of hospitals across the country, a lot in the Midwest. And it was the only hospital on the south side with a labor and delivery unit. So by closing the labor and delivery unit, that meant that people in that community no longer had access to it and would need to travel 20 minutes by car or up to an hour by bus to the next hospital with a labor and delivery unit. And that was something that we were very frustrated about, and we knew that we needed to join our community with this fight against this closure. The south side of Milwaukee is it's made up of it's a working class community. You have a lot of immigrant and Latino community there. So it wasn't just, removing access from a community. It was a direct attack against a community that, is on more state-funded healthcare, and therefore, Ascension wasn't making as much money out of that hospital. And I know that you talked with Tracy before on the show, and she explains all of this a lot better than I can. But
So,
for us,
another plug for Fight Back Radio. Go back and listen to Tracy Schwartz.
I'll just advertise all of the previous episodes.
There you go. Thank you. Keep going. Yes. No, I will not stop you, Hayley. Thank you.
But for us to get involved with this, it's a matter of pregnant people need healthcare too. You need healthcare for the delivery of a child. As we were saying, we believe in the right to have children. We believe in the choice to have children. And there needs to be better care around that. And to take that safety and that security of a hospital that you can trust for the delivery of a child is just not okay. It's not okay to take that away from the community and move it, anywhere between 20 minutes and an hour. So we joined the coalition to save St. Francis, and we fought with them, fought alongside them, not fought with them. We're very much part of them. And we're still working with them now as we're trying to figure out what those next steps are for the coalition.
No, that's great. And it's interesting because the people that are on the other side of the abortion issue from you often aren't there. I mean, they're the ones that are saying that we shouldn't have access to abortions, or we shouldn't have, the bodily autonomy that you're talking about. And but then once a child is born, they're like, we're against any kind of the supports that a mother actually needs, or the kind of health care that she actually needs, or the child needs. And it's the things they accuse our side of, you're actually out there fighting for. So my hat's off to you for that.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too, just to touch on that a little bit more, is we too want to see universal childcare. We want to see more parental leave. These are important things, not only for the part after birth, but also for that family, for that child, making sure that child has a family structure that's there and a community that's there. We're all for that. And that's the thing too, is choosing to not have a child and choosing to have a child. These aren't opposing factors. There's just so many factors that are involved with it that it all comes down to that choice, that right to decide what you're doing with your body and to be a part of that community. Yeah,
no, exactly. I know you told me that as your group was getting started and getting off the ground, you got support from the Milwaukee Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. And I was wondering, and first shout out to them for helping you guys out and getting this important organization going. But I know they've been involved in communities of color in Milwaukee and the National Alliance across the country. Could you talk a little bit about the issue of abortion and bodily autonomy, and how that affects people of color or poor people in Milwaukee or in any community for that matter?
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely shout out to the Milwaukee Alliance. Huge support that we have received from them, and we're so happy to be working with them. So abortion access, in these communities of color, you once again have barriers. You either do not have access within your community, and you have further barriers of transportation, of the financial need, travel, time off work, especially if you're not working a job that gives you any sort of flexibility. And the other thing, too, when we're looking at these communities, is how police violence does impact the ability to raise a child in a safe and sustainable community. So I very much see how our work with reproductive justice is very much tied to what Milwaukee Alliance is doing with being able to create communities that are for the community and remove from that violence of police crimes.
Okay, that's good. I know. I want to ask you about the Republican National Convention because for Fight Back Radios who don't know, it's going to be in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I think in July. I'm not sure of 2024. So that'll be coming up. And I know, many, there's been a group of organizations in Milwaukee that have been starting to organize around that. But from the point of view of your issue of reproductive justice, and I don't know if you're a part of that organization, but also I think we want to maybe there's a chance to encourage people to come to Milwaukee during that time. But can you talk a little bit about the Republican convention and how you see that, and how I know it's a little ways off now, but how the organizing for that is going?
Yeah, definitely. So RJA-M is what we call ourselves for short. We are a part of the coalition to march on the RNC here in Milwaukee with a lot of other grassroots organizations in Milwaukee. And we see it as like what the Republican convention is doing and what the right wing is doing is like very much against with what we're fighting for. They're the ones that are making these decisions, trying to control people's bodies, trying to control people in general, trying to control people's decisions and the ability for them to make their own decisions. And just the racist, transphobic, homophobic actions of the Republican Party and the right are not welcome in our city. And we're ready to show that. We're ready to show that, like, this is our city. This is what we're here for. And this is what Milwaukee is about.
And I think I've heard, I think other people from the coalition make a call, not just for the people of Milwaukee to show up, but wherever you are, I think this is a chance for Fight Back Radio listeners to get to know each other from around the country. Come to Milwaukee and protest the Republicans. I'm not sure who they'll be nominating. Maybe somebody from jail. We'll see how that goes. But it's but let me ask you also about the electoral politics a little bit, because we started off this interview a little bit by talking about different elected officials and trying to hold them accountable. But it's a tricky thing for electoral politics. It costs so much money, and there's it's not a system that's geared to empower working class people or people the disempowered. And so as you try to fight for a change on this important issue, how do you view electoral politics? How do you how do you look at the the Democratic Party or the Republican Party for that matter?
Yeah, so for Reproductive Justice Action Milwaukee, as I mentioned previously, we are here to push issues and hold elected officials accountable, regardless of which party you're associated with. Obviously, there are a lot of people that are identified as Republican or on the right wing that we more staunchly stand against, but that doesn't mean that we're not going to call out Democrats for not also doing what we believe is right. Here in Wisconsin, most recently, Governor Evers, who is an elected Democrat, governor, presented the shared revenue bill or act. My apologies.
Yeah, that's all right. Good.
And even though he's a Democrat, that is what's happening with the shared revenue is not okay for the community. It's not okay for Milwaukee, and Dane County and a lot of counties across Wisconsin. So even though, he's a Democratic governor that was elected in, that a lot of people might side with and might, be more liberal, he is still doing things that we do not agree with. And we are there to demand change and demand that the right things happen that will impact all of Wisconsinites, not just the ruling class.
Yeah, I mean, I think our experiences, whatever real change and real justice only comes from the people when they demand it. And I mean, Frederick Douglass, one of my favorite abolitionists, said power concedes nothing without a demand, and it never has and it never will. And I think that's right. I really do. And it's only when we get organized and really, let them know we're about business that concessions start to be made. And so my hat's off to you for what you're doing and the work you're doing. But let me ask you about that. So how did how did you get involved in the movement is really what the question is. And what drove you to do that, and why do you stay?
Yeah, definitely. I got involved with Reproductive Justice Action last summer, pretty soon after they were formed. And that was my first, time doing any sort of organizing, doing any sort of grassroots organizing. Prior to that, I definitely, wanted to do the right things. I attended a few protests, signed petitions, like whatever it may be, but I wasn't really actively organizing. And after the Dobbs decision, I just felt like I couldn't not do anything anymore. And there's definitely some hesitation of oh, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what should happen. Is this the right decision? Like going into organizing, it's kind of I don't know anything. Let's see what happens. But I think that's the biggest thing I've learned so far is that as soon as I kind of started working with the organization, I like to say that we thought we were doing a sprint, not a marathon, because that's what it felt like. We just kept going and kept pushing because we wanted to work for our community. We wanted to work for the people and make change for the people, to make change for the community. And that's the biggest thing that I learned. I don't have any sort of special organizing background. I just know that I have skills that apply to, helping us stay organized and helping lay the foundation for other people to continue to work with us and move forward with us. I think that's the biggest thing too, to call out to anybody that's listening that isn't an organizer and is, but has these passions. Get involved. Grassroots organizations always need people, whether that means for an hour you go hang out flyers for the next event, or you help draft a newsletter once a month, or, you helped us draft a resolution and do public comments at county meetings or city meetings. All of it needs to get done, and all of it needs to happen for the people. So the more people are involved, the better.
So if I'm a person who has self-doubt or whatever, but it feels like we need change, what you're telling me is if I show up at the Reproduction Justice Action Milwaukee meeting, that people like you will welcome me in and say, oh, we'll find out what I am good at, or if I'm not, train me. If I don't know how to pass out a flyer, you'll send somebody along with me to teach me how to do it, and I can be part of the change that's going on. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah. We always canvas in pairs. We always table in pairs. So at least you're with somebody else. If you're somebody that's into graphic design, love it. Help us design flyers. We're always welcoming new members, and we're always open to having people join us. That's the biggest thing, is just having people join us. And for people across the country, there's no reason you can't start your own organization too, like we did. We were just a group of people that were oh, this is something that needs to happen. And finding the support in your community, I think that's the biggest thing we learned, with the Milwaukee Alliance, with Freedom Roads, with so many other organizations. This is, reproductive justice, abortion access is very important right now. And all these organizations are also fighting their own fight. So it's hard to do it all. And that's kind of what I say is that, like, as a community, we're all able to focus on something and still support all these other actions and all these other campaigns. So there's no reason that, we can't have reproductive justice organizations throughout the country all fighting for, access for everyone.
No, that's good. That's good. You mentioned tabling. Let me ask you about that a little bit, because I'm always interested in, if you're standing behind a table and you say you're promoting, we need a referendum in Milwaukee County, or we need whatever your demand is at the time. What on this issue over the last year, what kinds of discussions have you had? Who comes to those tables and asks you, and what does that look like? And how do you, why is this an important activity for your organization?
Yeah, for us, it's one to show people that we're there and we're trying to make change. I think that's the biggest thing, is getting the community involved. And with that too is like getting the community involved with our campaigns. We want to, when we were, getting petition signatures to show the county board of supervisors that they need to make a statement that we need this advisory referendum, like showing that through everybody we talked to, through these signatures we got, that this is what the public wants, and having that outcome of the referendum as well, of 76% of Milwaukee County agreeing that we need to change. The other thing too is just education. We're not experts by any means, but we have connections, and we've learned, so much from these connections. So for us, one organization that I'm so happy exists is Powers, which is a organization focused in Wisconsin that is, basically a helpline that if you're newly pregnant, if you're concerned about that, if you have questions, if you're concerned how do I tell my partner this, whatever it may be, you can call them and talk to them and figure out, whatever your options are for whatever that situation is. And so just by having that connection with us, and then being able to share that connection with the community as well, of knowing that there are options out there for whatever situation you're in, is also, I think, very key for us, is not only getting public support, but also educating the community about what access is also out there.
So let me ask you a little bit about access for a minute. So there's no access, or no legal access anyways, in Wisconsin right now. But I live in Chicago. You can, if you're on the border, it probably is a little better. If you're up in northern Wisconsin, it's probably more difficult. But is there attempts to try to, I've heard talk here in Chicago about trying to help people from other states where abortion is banned, come to Illinois to be able to have abortions and to have the bodily autonomy, even if they have to travel for it. And are you involved in trying to help promote that kind of access? Or, the other thing I've heard, let me ask you another question too, similar, is that of cities and states trying to get prosecutors not to prosecute people that are, maybe doing something that's whatever, questionable under the law. And so, those kind of tactics, is your organization, how do you feel about those first off, and are you involved in them in any kind of way?
Yeah, so Reproductive Justice Action Milwaukee is not directly involved with that access, but we do very much promote, like I said, contacting Powers. There's the Wisconsin Medical Fund, which is an abortion fund that's been around for decades, that provides financial and other assistance with people traveling to get abortions. So, in the Milwaukee area, Chicago is the closest. If you're further west in the state, Minnesota, the Twin Cities. So the Wisconsin Medical Fund helps coordinate that and connect with other cities and states where you can get that access. And very much tied to what Powers is doing. So we're not directly involved with that, but we very much are promoting that, you can't get an abortion in Wisconsin, but these are the means in which you can access it otherwise. one of our campaigns we're working on right now is trying to get the district attorney of Milwaukee County, D.A. Chisholm, to sign a pledge stating that he will not prosecute any medical providers that are providing abortions. He made a statement last summer saying that he won't do this, but we feel that it's important to have something in writing because many times before, elected officials may say something and do something different. So for us, we're fighting right now to get him to sign a pledge to say that he will not prosecute. Because the biggest thing with there being no access in abortion access in Wisconsin is that as soon as the Dobbs decision was overturned, any providers, abortion providers, could no longer provide that service. So what we're hoping to do with these actions of getting D.A. Chisholm to say that he won't prosecute is we're trying to create a safe space for medical providers to be actually provide the services that they want to provide to the community. So that's one thing that we're working on now and continually contacting his office about. Very long time, he was not responding to us. We were able to get a meeting with him in which he said that he does not sign pledges. But, that doesn't mean that we're going to stop.
Right.
Just because you say no doesn't mean that means, okay, we'll move on to the next thing. The community demands this. So that's what we're working on now is just trying to continue to get the community under us for them to continue to contact his office to say like, hey, no, this needs to happen to, have him make a statement and have him sign a pledge about not prosecuting.
Okay, no, that sounds good. I mean, I don't want to be accountable for anything. I don't think is a very good position for a politician to take. But
yeah, you would think so.
But yes, unfortunately, our time has went quickly here. We're starting to run out. Is there anything else that we haven't brought up that you'd like to let our Fight Back Radio listeners know about?
Yeah, definitely. So along with kind of a lot of the other work that I mentioned previously, one thing else that we are currently fighting for is, as I mentioned earlier on, is that there's currently a push in Wisconsin. There's a court case going through that we're hoping to leave to the Supreme Court to overturn the abortion ban, which is obviously needed, but we think that that's just the floor. We think that Roe was just the floor and there's so much more that needs to be done. And so we are focusing on 3 demands that we're going to bring to the state once the overturn happens, which is no waiting periods for abortion access, to have free and on-demand abortions, and expand access to rural areas. As I mentioned before, prior to the Dobbs decision, abortion access was only in a few counties in Wisconsin that were pretty close to each other. And so making sure that, as I mentioned before, there is actually access throughout the state. Additionally, I just want to say that if you're in Milwaukee, if you're in the Milwaukee area, we're having a new member meeting on July 8th. So check out us on Instagram or check out our website, Reproductive Justice Action Milwaukee.com, for what's going on, what's upcoming. And then I also wanted to shout out a July 4th event that we were working on with Milwaukee Alliance, which is the People's Independence Day, and just recognizing that since this country was formed, the rich have been independent and nobody else has been. So calling attention to these injustices that we're facing throughout multiple communities in the country. So, people get involved, figure out what's going on in your area, and you can make change too.
Oh, that's wonderful. So we'll put in the show notes the contact information for Reproductive Justice Action Milwaukee. And so people, if you're in the Milwaukee area, check them out. Even if you're not, I would say check them out. And this is an important issue, and it's one that there's organizations around the country that you should be involved in. I know we had the Students for Democratic Society on the Fight Back Radio a while back, and for our college student friends, they have done a lot around this issue as well over the last year. But Hayley, thank you so much. You've been such a wonderful guest, and thank you for being so generous with your time.
Thank you so
forward
much.
to seeing you at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee.
Oh, I'm excited. We're ready.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so that was Hayley McNeill, and I think the interview, it tells us why we need to get our butts in gear and get out there and stand for reproductive justice, to stand with with people who are suffering, and not let the right wing, the extreme right wing, have their way in this country. So thank you, Hayley, for that. I mentioned in the intro to this episode that we had received some criticism. Our last episode was celebrating Fight Back Radio's celebration of Pride, and we continue as we come in the last days of the Pride Month to celebrate that. And really, we should be celebrating it year round, I think. But and I mentioned we listen. We all of our emails, we read them and we take them seriously. So richard.fightbackradio@gmail.com, and I'll look at each and every one of them. For the LGBTQ Pride Month episode, I listed a number of things and encouraged people to say, hey, check this out, but we're really not giving any depth to it. And the criticism was that that I should give a little more than just name dropping. And so I wanted to do that here, and it's still only going to be a very brief thing of some of the things I think people should look into as we finish up Pride Month right now. But I mentioned Stonewall, for example, and many of our listeners I know what Stonewall is. But for those of you that don't, it is important. It was in 1969. There was the Stonewall Inn was a bar in where LGBTQ people gathered, and it was regularly raided by the police, and people would get beat up and harassed. And in June of 1969, there was a police raid, but the customers had enough, and they fought back, and they fought back ferociously, and really ran the police off. And for days after that, there were riots in and around the neighborhood. So our hats off to the very courageous people at Stonewall who fought back. And as I said, you should dig into this some more. But I wanted to give you more than just a name drop on it. And some of the other people I mentioned in our Pride episode as well. I mentioned martyrs. Harvey Milk was a supervisor for the city of San Francisco. Not a supervisor like a boss, but like a city council member, a politician. And he had spent a lifetime fighting for gay rights and to be treated just with the basic civil rights and human dignity for all LGBTQ people. And he was the first elected openly gay politician. He was assassinated and while in office. And so that's a tragedy. And there's a lot more to it. Of course, there was a movie that was very popular about him. But again, you should check this out. Also, I mentioned as a martyr Matthew Shepard, who was a student. I think he was like 21 years old at the University of Wyoming, who was tortured and murdered simply because he was gay. And it was actually the whole hate crime. The idea of hate crimes and that they should have extra punishment came out of this, and the movement that developed because of Matthew Shepard. But it was a tragic story of just a person being themselves and being this kind of anger and rage that came and was tolerated and is continued to be tolerated in some corners, and we can't stand for it. The last two I wanted to name were really leaders of the movement, groundbreakers. One was Harry Hay, who was, he was an activist. He was actually an extra in movies. He lived in California, and he did different bit parts in movies and made a living that way. But he was a member of the Communist Party. He was a brilliant theoretician. He actually taught in the Communist Party schools and played a major role in writing curriculum on Marxism for people. But he was he's credited with being the founder of the Montache Society, which is the first consistent gay organization in the country, in the United States. And it was groundbreaking. He later became the founder of a group called the Radical Fairies. But there's a book written by Stuart Timmons called The Trouble with Harry Hay. And I recommend people check that out. And the last person I want to say a little more about was Leslie Feinberg, who was also a communist and a theoretician, an author, a novelist. And she wrote the novel about Butch Blues, and but is somebody that you can go look her up on Wikipedia, whatever. But read her writings about it was really groundbreaking, especially about trans people. Some of the ideas that she put out there from a Marxist perspective, and was really the first to do this. And so these are people that you should check out and. Continue to celebrate Pride, celebrate who you are, it's whatever. It's important, and we encourage you, as I said earlier, please send us emails. Let us know what you think of this podcast. I hope you're enjoying it. I'm enjoying bringing it to you, and we're able to bring it to you. This is my chance to plug our production team, which really. I do it every week, but they are so good. Dodd McColgan, Natalie Pranis, Shane Tremley, Vince Olson, they make it all happen. And for the entire Fight Back Radio team, I'm Richard Berg saying until next time, all power to the people.